That's not going to work. This couch is way too loud. The couch is bad for my audio. I got some squeaking going on. Bear with me here, guys. There we go. You can't tell with the couch in person, it's not loud, but the way that this picks stuff up, it's definitely going to like do this through the whole thing. Oh wow! I was sitting here waiting for people to join because I don't have a chat line on right now because this is a different kind of video. I wanted to sit down and do something really special with y'all guys. So I see though, I've still got my counter. It shows we've got 11 people in the room, and wow, the video's been like 17 times. Some of y'all guys are double clicking. Thank you so very much. Yeah. So for the past few years, as I wander and travel, I told myself this story. It's a story that's based off of a book that my dad wrote a long time ago. So as I've traveled, I came up with a sequel or my own rendition, kind of in homage or something, because my dad's book, I think, was based a lot on his life. And I think that I have kind of changed the story a little bit to reflect a little bit of my life, maybe. Now, my dad is a sensitive subject for me still, and so I will be emotional sometimes. I apologize for that. I try and not be too emotional all the time, and the story itself will reflect that reason. So, also, I've it different ways to myself. It's sequence might be different, or maybe I'll add something new that I thought of that sounds neat or something like that. I said the story's been told to me by myself a couple hundred times. And I'm kind of a little nervous because I don't want to mess it up. I couldn't sometimes, because it's been a while, I can't remember the sequence, right? So I did write down some bullet points here just so that I know I don't skip a part of the story. Yeah, I've always wanted to do it for y'all guys, and with recent events and stuff and how hard things have been, you see, my life, I've wanted to do a lot of really cool things, especially here with y'all guys, and we never got to. So I figured tonight I would go ahead and just do it. What's that a slogan from? Oh, that reminds me. This video is brought to you by the Omak Inn here in Omak. It's a family-owned business. The staff are amazing and all friendly. The rooms are clean, comfortable, and spacious. They always have hot coffee at the front desk. If you're ever in this area, be sure to stop by and tell them that Matt sent you. Okay, guys, so here we go. Once upon a time in a forest, far, far away, there lived a squirrel, and his name was Cant. And they called him Cant because he couldn't. Squirrels, young squirrels, he was a young squirrel. He was born just recently, actually. And most squirrels, when they're born, most young squirrels, it's really easy for them to learn squirrel things. When to bark, when to chatter, when to squeak, when to thresh their tail, and when to hold real still with their hands out in front of them like this and just look at you. Normally they learn really quick, like I said. But Cant couldn't. And so they called him Cant. Everything was slow for Cant. The most basic squirrel thing was really hard for him to learn. And it made it difficult too to feel like he was part of anything, because by the time he was starting to learn something, all of the rest of the squirrels, they had moved on to another squirrel subject. And so that bothered him. You know, he would have liked to have been able to get along with the rest of the squirrels and fit in and everything. but it was the way it was for him. And it didn't bother him too much because he wasn't really that interested in squirrel things. There was something different about Camp. Camp wanted to see over the next hill. Squirrels, they stay in their town forever. It's actually against squirrel rules to roam and go out. So they only have the borders of the town and everything within it. And a squirrel's job, basically, they gather nuts and seeds and things like that to take care of their little community through the winter. And then they warn the rest of the forest about predators. So when there's a predator on the ground and they're going through Squirrel Town, the squirrels will look down and they bark. So they'll get on the tree right above the predator and they bark and they thrash their tail back and forth. And that tells everything in the forest that lives on the ground that there's a predator there. It is a very, very important job. So a squirrel has to be there. Can't, though, like I said, was different. He could only see from the top of the tallest tree in his town, the third hill out, and nothing further. And he wondered and wondered what could possibly be beyond the third hill. Is it a fourth hill or is it flat? Are there trees or berry bushes? Could there be another squirrel town just over and past the third hill? It bothered him and he daydreamed and he made shapes out of the clouds about it. I'm so sorry, guys. My hotel phone is ringing. Give me one moment. Maybe I should take it off the hook. Yeah, nobody is calling my house phone. If it was important, somebody would call another phone. It's actually kind of inconsiderate. Anyway, I'm so sorry, guys. Where was I? Threw me off. So, third hill. What's on the other side? Do you ever do that? Is there ever a little question in your mind that that you wonder like that? Some little thing that pulls at our heart. I do sometimes. I have things like that. Nowadays, what I try and do is go out and like see them and stuff. See if it's something that's truly really important to me. Because I know those are the things in life I feel that are kind of our life's mission. Those little things that maybe we forgot when we grew up that we really liked when we were kids. So can't. One night it got late, and it got dark. Squirrels go to bed pretty early. They go to bed, I don't know, just about as the sun starts to go down, they'll go in, and then they stay in their little tree and they talk to each other for a little while and all, but they go to bed pretty early because they have to get up early in the morning. The predators are out by the time the sun comes up, so they have to be there to warn everything in the forest. So by the time everybody else was asleep, Cant just couldn't sleep. It had bugged him so much this day because he didn't fit in with the rest of the squirrels very well. They were on a new subject that he had problems learning, right? So after everybody went to sleep, he went down the tree. He got this crazy idea that he could go see what's beyond the third hill. And so he did. Hello? Who's this? Who is this? Hey, why would you call me in the middle of my life? Okay, I understand how that is. Well, it's good to finally meet you. How are you doing? Good. It's okay. It's okay, my friend. Are you doing well, though? How are things around there? Oh, did you? Yes. Okay. Well, I appreciate you for being a friend and for being out there. And I'm glad that you're doing good. No, I have the chat line off because I'm telling you a story. It's a rendition of a story that my dad wrote when I was a kid, where I was more like a teenager. But I tell the story to myself sometimes when I'm like out walking and stuff, and it's something that I've always wanted to share with everybody. So I figured so that people could pay attention to the story that I just turned the chat line off on this one, and then tomorrow I think I'm going to do another one where we'll all have the chat line and everything. And I just want to focus on things that are more positive now. It's okay. I know how that is. I do. Trust me. And I'm glad that you did actually. Now we finally meet. It's good to hear your voice, my friend. Man, I appreciate that. Now, wow. I remember you from my Christmas lives. Yes, I know. I know. That's why I really got to start paying attention and really started to gain to know everybody. Yeah, yeah. It's actually for me. It's better to communicate through Instagram. Really, I use the Instagram call because it's safer. I don't give out my number really. So like the end to end encryption makes sure that nobody can like hack through my system and stuff. So what would actually be better? Why don't you leave me a message on Instagram and then I'm getting my phone fixed so I can call you here and like when I get stable again. All right. Do you have an Android phone? Okay, no, you can get there's a thing called Google Meet. It's also very secure. Look, let me let you go, my friend. I'm going to get back to telling the story and everything, and then we will get in touch, okay? Right now things have been very chaotic for me and everything, and so I'm just having to get back on my feet, okay? I'm so glad that you called though. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. So Kent he snuck a tree and through Squirrel Town. He was even really sneaky about it. He didn't think that he could plan that well. Uh, Dodged around houses, skirted around the edge. He knew exactly where he was going. He was going to the north end of Squirrel Town because that's the hill that he had looked at. He got to the border and he was a little nervous. That feeling of doing something wrong, but how exciting it was at the same time. And then really getting to scratch that itch because when you talk to other squirrels about it, they just didn't understand, right? And nobody talked to him about it. Nobody knew. So he stepped across the boundary of the town. He had just broken squirrel law. And he didn't even really realize it. He took two or three more steps. The moon was bright. The night was calm. The breeze was blowing. It smelled so good. It didn't smell like during the day. He was shocked by it. It was weird how different it was. And the moon was so beautiful. He scampered over the first hill, the second hill. Right there in front of him was the third hill. Now he noticed the stars. The stars even looked different from here. Uh, he crawled nice and slow, almost like he was trying to savor the moment, right? What is over? Got up to the top of the hill. He looked. It was another hill. Oh, he was right. It was another hill. He thought it would have been neat if there was a squirrel town, but then he thought to himself, they might have seen me. So he's like, it's a hill. He wasn't a bad squirrel. He was just curious. So he started heading back to the forest. He figured, maybe I'll do this another time. Maybe I'll see what's over that fourth hill. He was really happy with himself that he got the answer and everything. He felt brave, actually, almost. And squirrels, especially young squirrels, well, when they feel good, they do what squirrels have to do. They run around and they jump up in the air and they swish their tail and they chatter, and everybody knows that they're so happy, right? He couldn't contain how happy he was. He felt like he had achieved his life's goal, and so he did. He ran back and forth and he scampered and he jumped up and down and he swished his tail, and then, oh no, something terrible happened. He didn't know what it was. He started to fall. He was falling fast, but everything was moving slow. Then all of a sudden he realized he'd fallen in the river. The river ran through Squirrel Town. All little squirrels knew, be careful around it. They built these little things to protect them, and little bridges across. He couldn't believe he'd done this. And then he hit the water. He bubbled, and he couldn't see anything, and he couldn't hear, and he couldn't breathe, and he was thrown back and forth. And then all of a sudden, the little squirrel went to sleep. He woke up the next day, laying half in the water and half out, sideways. It was very cold. He tried to get up, but he couldn't move his muscles. Nothing would work. You'd move them just a little bit, and then finally a little bit more. The sun was coming up, and it started to warm him. Finally, it started to warm, and he got up, and he tried to dry himself off. It took a little bit while longer before he actually was warm. And he stood up. He still didn't realize, because he was so cold, how bad things were. He thought to himself for a moment, I'm going to be in trouble. Right out in front of him, there was a large tree and a big field. And the tree had a little crack in the front of it. It was an old dead tree with limbs laying all around it and some small yellow flowers growing here and there. He went over to the tree because it felt safe, but he still wasn't strong enough to climb. So he sat down in front of the tree and he started to warm himself more in the sun. He stood up after he had warmed and looked out. That's when he saw something weird. Out there in the middle of the field, there was something gray running as fast as it possibly could across the field, and not making very good time either. It was barely getting this far. He sat and looked, and he was like, I wonder what the heck that is. Well, he thought of Squirrel School. Because he was wanted to be an explorer, basically. He'd been able to pay attention to what they told him other animals looked like that weren't in the town that he lived in, that he would never see, basically, right? So he had this list in his head that he could read off, and he'd know what he was looking at. So he stopped and he thought, and he was like, okay, it's small and gray. It has big ears and a tail with no hair. It's a mouse. He felt so good that he figured it out, right? Something he'd never seen before. He almost forgot how much trouble he was going to be in. Then all of a sudden, something weird happened, something strange, something he never would have imagined. Some big thing flew out of the sky and swooped down and grabbed the little gray mouse and flew away with it. He stood there, shocked. Then all of a sudden, something grabbed him from behind and pulled him into the hole. He was scared. The thing held him and held its hand over his mouth. Don't make a sound, the voice said. The voice was scary. The way the voice sounded, it made him want to do what the voice said. At the same time, though, there was something about the voice, a confidence that made him feel like if he did what the voice told him to, everything was going to be okay. But then that seriousness, that if he didn't, it might not. He looked out. All of a sudden, another big bird swooped down and grabbed something from behind a rock and flew away with it. He sat there and looked. The hand moved from his mouth, It let go of him. Okay. It's all right now. You can turn around, he said. He kind of didn't want to, but in a way, he couldn't resist seeing what the heck it was. He turned around to look, and there wasn't anything there. Hey, down here, said the voice. He looked down, and there it was, about half the size of him, but covered in muscles and with its hair all slicked back. He couldn't figure out what it was at first, so he found the list in his head. Okay, covered in fur, brown with a white tummy, big ears, a tail with no hair on it. Are you a mouse? Yeah, I'm a mouse, said the mouse. I'm a field mouse. Huh, what the heck are you? You are the biggest mouse I've ever seen. I'm not a mouse. I'm a squirrel. A squirrel? What you can't possibly be a squirrel. There haven't been squirrels here in more than 20 years. There haven't been squirrels here since all the trees blew down out there. That's why it's such a big field. Yeah, there used to be squirrels, but you can't possibly be a squirrel. How would a squirrel get here? So Cant told him the story, and he listened intently, like he was paying attention to every word. He was the kind of listener that really made you feel heard. After he got through with his story, and the river brought me here to you, the mouse was wide-eyed and kind of shocked. Can you help me get back home? Asked Cant. It's too far. It's too far. You won't make it. No. You're going to die or get eaten. You'll probably drown. It's just too far to the ridge. You won't make it back to the ridge, said the little mouse, the little field mouse. Cant started to cry. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Then all of a sudden, without a warning, in the blink of an eye, the field mouse grabbed him, kicked his feet out from underneath him, threw him down on the ground, and got right in his face. He closed one eye and looked at him and and he says, "Don't ever cry and let them see you bleed. But you said that I'll never make it," he said. "It doesn't matter who says you can't make it. You have to believe that you can make it. And don't ever let them see you be weak. Okay? Okay." The mouse let him go. "So I can make it." "You don't have any choice except to try. Do you know how to hide? Do you know how to turn invisible? What do you know?" "I'll teach you everything I know. I've survived out here my entire life. The most important thing you need to do is pay attention. Every animal has to know what to do in the environment where it lives. You're going to have to learn how to live here, and you're going to have to get home." "How do I get home? How do I learn how to live here?" "I will teach you. I'll teach you everything I know. All right? You've got a mission. You've got to get home." So Cant and the mouse's name was Riddick, actually. Cant and Riddick hung out for about a week. It took Cant a very long time to learn even the most basic things. But Riddick was patient. He taught him how to hide. He taught him that if you're going to turn invisible, there's a trick. He taught him some things are good at turning invisible and some things aren't. Quail are not very good at turning invisible because they know how to hold really still, which is half of turning invisible. But they don't realize that they have to hide really still in front of something that looks kind of like them. So a quail will just stand out there in the middle of the open and get eaten if they don't get the chance to fly away. Cant was amazed by the idea of getting eaten, being a meal by something else. He didn't know what a predator was. Riddick asked him, do you know what a predator does? And he's like, yeah, they're sneaky. And Riddick's like, do you know why they're sneaky? And he's like, because they're sneaky. And Riddick's like, no. And he explained, you know how you eat nuts and seeds and acorns and stuff like that? Cam's like, yeah. That's what you saw a minute ago. Cam was blown away, right? So it was a hard life. It was a bunch of hard truths, Riddick explained to him now, as he was teaching him things, your mission, there's one thing about your mission that you don't have to worry about. And Camp was excited about that. He goes, all you have to do is follow the river. You don't need anyone to take you home. All you have to do is keep going. So after about a week, it was time for Camp to leave. He stood there and looked up the river. Riddick told him, now you have to do this right out there. You will probably get eaten, die, or probably drown. If you face that and you are epic, you'll make it home. Do you understand? But I'll remember, said Camp. Can you say it again? He looked upstream again. I guess it's time to go, Camp said. But Riddick didn't say anything. He turned around, and Riddick was gone. Chapter 1, Riddick. Camp remembered what Riddick said, how to travel and how to hide. He said, what you're going to want to do, you go just a little ways, and then you hide. You take 3-4 steps, and then you hide. And when you hide, you look out in front of you at the next thing that you're going to hide in. And that's how you travel, especially crossing fields. He taught him about the eagles and the hawks and the falcons and the owls. He called them dots. He explained, do you see the dots in the sky? Well, from up there, we can't see them, but down here, they can see us blink our eye. So he did what Riddick said. He traveled for a couple days when all of a sudden he came to a spot along the river that was very, very beautiful. It reminded him of Squirrel Town, where he came from. All the flowers were kind of the same, and he had a couple berries, and he was feeling really good about himself. So he sat down at the edge of the river for a minute, and he was just looking and enjoying the sunshine and everything, when all of a sudden a voice said something behind him. So what are you doing here? He was scared, but he didn't want to show it. He turned around and looked, and all he saw were sharp white teeth. He was so scared. All he wanted to do was run. Just get up and run. He didn't even care which way he ran. He might have ran and fallen right back into the river. It was just everything that he could possibly do not to run. Riddick said never run. He stood up and turned around. It was a giant gray wolf standing there looking at him, looking down on him. I can't believe what I am seeing. There haven't been squirrels here in more than 20 years, maybe. How did you get here? Kent was so scared he couldn't talk. But ever since he fell in the river, his nose was running. He kind of sniffled and tried to talk, but his lips wouldn't move, and it kind of looked like he was quivering his lips. Oh, poor baby. You gonna cry? Asked the wolf. Well, now he was kind of mad. He'd done so much work not to cry, not to run, not to show how afraid he was. I'm not crying, he said. I hurt my nose when I fell in the river. The wolf was kind of taken back by the aggressive nature of the squirrel. The squirrel was kind of taken back by it too. He thought and was so scared for what he just said. I shouldn't have said that, he thought. He's going to eat me now. Maybe if I was nice, he would have let me go, he thought. The wolf thought for a moment. Hey, you're from the ridge. Yeah, I know that place well. I hunt up there all the time. I am the king of the wolves. They call me sire. And so can you. Well, it looks like your roaming days are through. But first, I want to hear your story. How'd you fall in the river? What happened? Now, nobody really knew, but the king of the wolves was very curious. He was a lot like Kant, actually. He wondered about things that a wolf didn't need to wonder about. And most animals, they only needed to know what they needed to know. And they were happy to know just that, because then they could be good at just that, right? And that's all they needed to know. But the wolf had an incurable curiosity. Kant told him the story. It was Riddick that really impressed him. And there was something about the mission. Then all of a sudden, the rest of the wolves showed up. 9, 10, 12, almost as big as the king of the wolves. One of them was horrible looking. His bite marks in his ear, a scar across his face. His tail had been broken multiple times and it was all crooked back and forth. And he was muscular. He wasn't a sick, hurt wolf. You could tell that he had fought a lot. And he was almost as big as the king. He walked up beside the king. "Eat him, sire, and we may go," said Starscream, the second in command of the wolves. "In a moment," said the king. "I'm listening to his story. Squirrel, tell him the story." So he sat there and he told him the story. It wasn't anything that he had done or anything really, but by the end, a couple of the wolves, including the king, kind of respected him a little bit. It wasn't so much that they respected him, it was that they respected how impossible his mission was. Something inside the king told him, "I'm not going to end this. When the squirrel's mission ends, it won't be because of me." He had envisioned himself the same way. Wolves have an idea of honor among themselves, mainly. They consider themselves to be very tough, very strong, very mission orientated. So when they set out to do something, they achieve it. And if it were to go home, yeah, they'd respect that. Starscream, though, wasn't pleased at all. Starscream this entire time was almost starting to shake with anger. And Starscream, when he got angry, would drool. Kant was looking at him and just realizing that, as the king explained, your mission to go home, it's a heck of a thing. I almost envy you to have to do something so strong, something so bold. It's a mission not for a squirrel, that's for sure. But your mission won't end here. You're a bite. You're not even a grown squirrel, and you're small for a small squirrel. Nah, we'll let you go. You can keep on going up the ridge. As Kant was noticing Starscream start to shake, something inside of him, he could just feel it. He'd kept so good this entire time. He had kept himself from running. He'd fought his own instincts. He bravely answered the king's questions as bravely as he could. But then he just couldn't take it anymore. There was something about Starscream's demeanor that he couldn't do it. And for a second, he ran. He ran as fast as he could for a second. And then he stopped himself. He remembered what Riddick said. Now, he didn't realize, and it was just dumb luck. At the exact same time that he bolted to run and then stopped, Starscream bit at him. Starscream was just going to eat him right there. A wolf moves like that. Nothing is faster than them. Their bite is almost unseeable. The wolf is invincible and never misses. especially the second in command. Dumb luck made it look like he did. The Wolf King sire was mad about this. There's a chain of command, an honor system, and the king is the most important. Once he's made a decree, that's the way it's supposed to be. And wolves will fight about it. So the king of the wolves started fighting his own second in command. It didn't take long. The second didn't fight back. He knew not to. He wouldn't be second anymore. It's the wolf law. Fight only took a moment. And when they turned around, though, Cant was gone. Wolves looked everywhere for him, but he wasn't to be found. They looked in the trees, they looked on the ground, under the log. He wasn't there. So they went on. It's only a squirrel. And to maintain their honor, they couldn't look for a squirrel. That would mean that the squirrel had beaten them. And that's just insane. It'd be like a chicken wing beating me. About 20 minutes after they left, Cant came down out of the tree. He did everything that Riddick said. He'd been looking around the whole time for somewhere to hide. And his eye kept drawing to the tree. There was a mushroom, there was a log, there was the tree trunk, and squirrels are really good at scurrying around the back of a tree. So that's exactly why he did when he noticed that no one was looking at him. He came down out of the tree and walked back over to where the whole thing just happened. And he looked down on the ground, and there was a piece of wolf's hair laying on the ground. Just a little bitty tuft, right? He thought to himself, I'm going to keep this. So he grabbed it and he twisted it and he wrapped it around his wrist and he tied it as best he could to remember. And he kept on going. Chapter 2, The Wolves. It wasn't long, only a couple days, before he started coming to a clearing. Hang on. I've got bullet points. I said I've only ever told the story to myself a few hundred times in different ways. Oh, sorry. Skip sign. It was a couple days. And he's still following the river. Now, something terrible again happened. He was starting to feel good again about getting away from the wolves. And he knew that all he had to do was keep following the river. He knew that the hardest thing to do, actually, was survive a wolf attack. You know, they're the baddest thing in the forest. And so he was feeling pretty good. And that's when he came up over a hill, and he noticed something terrible, which was starting to become kind of a pattern in his life. He was starting to feel like every time things seemed like they were going to work out, something really, really terrible would happen. And so far, he was right. The river forked. It was fed from two streams that were coming in that increased the river and made it larger. And he didn't know which way to go. Do I go left? Do I go right? He said, I don't know. He sat down. Riddick said, if you can't figure it out, stare at it and think about it. And you can, whatever it is. And Cant sat and thought. But he couldn't get the answer. And he stopped. He'd think, okay, how do I not do this? How do I quit? What do I do? Where do I go? How, where? How do I just pick one? Then I'll know. What do I do? I think. And he stared at the river and he thought just as hard as he possibly could. But still nothing. And he did that over and over because he couldn't figure out what else to do. There wasn't any other answer. There wasn't anywhere to go. There wasn't anybody to help him. Just stared. Finally, he started to cry. He couldn't help it. He looked around. There wasn't anybody there. So he started to cry. And crying kind of felt good. All of a sudden, he heard a voice behind him. Oh, no. This one was low and soft, though. He thought to himself, it's probably a bear. He turned around and dried his eyes. And he turned around and looked. "Why you crying, little buddy?" asked a big brown thing standing in front of him. He was sure it was a bear now. He looked at it. Okay, it's big, it's brown, it has small round ears, a big flat tail with no hair on it. No hair on it. He thought for a second. He goes, "I wasn't crying. Are you a mouse? Are you a gigantic mouse?" Oh, goodness, no. Goodness. That'd be a pretty big mouse, said the thing. "No, kid. I am actually a beaver. My name is Mr. Flattail." "A beaver? What's a beaver?" asked Cant. And so Flattail explained. Flattail was a really nice guy, actually. He asked him, he was like, "Man, squirrels haven't been around here for like, shoot, more than 20 years. Where did you come from?" So Cant told the story. And it ended just like it ended with the wolves. "I fell in a river. It brought me here to you. A friend of mine told me I'd probably drown, get eaten, or be a meal, or die." Flattail was amazed. "I know that place," he said. "Why are you crying?" "I wasn't crying," said Cant. "Is there any way I can help you?" asked Mr. Flattail. "Well, my problem is that the river goes two ways, and I'm following the river to get back to the ridge where I live. I don't know which way to go, and I've thought about it a lot, but I can't figure out which way to go. Can you show me either how to figure out which way to go, or do you know which way to go to get back to the ridge?" Mr. Flattail said, "Yes, I know which way to go. Actually, I logged this entire area. I'll take you back to, I can tell you how to get back to the ridge." The squirrel was amazingly happy about this. He actually jumped up and chattered and ran back and forth, and he grabbed the beaver and gave him a big hug. So Mr. Flattail explained, "Now, you can't be out here like this. You're going to get eaten, especially if you don't know which way to go. The river is really, really complicated, actually. It forks and veers around and splits off into different branches several times before it gets back to the ridge. Now, I can draw you a map, and you can sit down and memorize that map and then redraw it again, and then you'll have that map so that you can travel, okay?" So Flattail sat down, and he took out his stick, and he drew the map perfectly and showed him, "There's the ridge. Put an X on it. After the waterfall, there's 4 hills, and then Squirrel Town." He was ecstatic. Mr. Flattail handed him the stick and said, "Now you draw it." Cant all of a sudden remembered that he couldn't, that he had a really hard time learning. So he took the stick and he tried, but he couldn't. And he did it again and again, but he couldn't. Mr. Flattail was very patient. He tried to help him over and over and over again for like a couple hours. Cant apologized and said, "I'm so sorry," right? "It's all right, kid. It's all right. Don't worry about it. Look, give me some. Can you hold your breath?" "I don't know. I've never tried." "You're going to have to give it a shot. I'm a beaver. I'm a logger. I've logged here for generations and stuff. If you see that lake out there, my ancestors are responsible for building it. Beavers, we live in like lodges, as we take a bunch of," and he taught him what it was. "We take a bunch of sticks and stuff, and we go out in the middle of the lake because predators can't get out there, and then we build our house. The problem, though, is that the door is underwater. The house has air and stuff, and it's nice and dry and warm. You get inside, you'll be fine, but you're going to have to hold your breath to get in. You can get on my back and hold on and all. Are you all right? Do you think you can do it?" Cant thought for a minute. "I don't think I have any choice but to try." And they did. Kant grabbed onto his, and they jumped in the water, and the beaver took off. And beavers look kind of slow on land. Mr. Flattail didn't look fast at all. But once he hit that water, he took off like a jet. And that's how the water hit Kant. His eyes were blasted back and his cheeks were filled with water, and he held his breath as much as he could as he held on to the beaver's back. And it seemed like it took forever. He looked around as much as he could, and it was beautiful. There was green grass growing up from the bottom and swaying in the sunlight. The ground was covered with beautiful pebbles and all kinds of golden, flashy little rocks. He thought to himself, this would be such a beautiful place to live if only there was some air. A few minutes later, they popped up into, or a few seconds later, he couldn't hold his breath for minutes. He popped up into the beaver's lodge. He spent a while with them there. Mr. Flattail was very, very patient. Mr. Flattail had about 20 kids. During the day, they would go out and they would learn how to log. He taught them everything that his dad taught them. The older ones would take more advanced classes, and then the younger ones would take less advanced classes, and then the baby stayed home and chewed on balsa wood. Balsa wood is a very light wood that's easy to carve, or it would be easy to chew on. So Camp hung around with them. During the day, now he was constantly learning how to draw that map. But during the day, he would go out with them and he would watch them. And then at night, he would come back and Mr. Flattail would tell stories. And then after dinner and the story, they would have one last round of logging school. So they would all sit there on the floor in front of Mr. Flattail, and he would teach them some trick or secret about logging. And the next day, afterwards, they would see if they remembered what he taught them before, and if they did, they got a special prize. So Kant sat there and listened, and he watched the Mr. Flattail show him how to chew and pass it on, and they passed it on in a circle. And then it got to Kant. Kant didn't even realize he was sitting in the circle. He took the log and he handed it to the next little beaver sitting next to him, and the next little beaver just looked at it, looked up at Kant, looked back at the log, looked up at Kant, handed it back to Kant. Kant took it. He's trying to hand it back. Mr. Flattail's like, would you like a turn? Yes, please, said Kant. Absolutely. Come over here for a second. This will be your first lesson. So why don't you come over here for a second? I'll show you how to start. All the rest of the beavers sat there wondering if the squirrel could do it. He had such small teeth, but he was really into it. He paid a lot of attention, and they all liked him. He was really a nice guy. So Kant got up and went over, and Mr. Flattail showed him how to chew the log, right? Well, like everything else, Kant couldn't figure it out. He sat there and he got embarrassed, and then he got scared, and then he got nervous, and he thought, well, they're not going to like me because I'm not even good at this. And it reminded him of squirrel school, and his heart started to beat, and he was getting all a little bit dizzy. And then one of the little squirrel or beaver kids walked up and said, it's okay, take your time. And he turned around and looked, and he noticed that none of the little beaver kids were worried about their turn. They just wanted him to be able to do it. So they all sat patiently for about 2 hours. Some of the younger ones actually fell asleep on the floor. After Kant finally did it, everybody went to sleep. Mr. and Mrs. Flattail carried the little ones to bed. Finally, the day came when Kant could draw the map, and it was time for him to go. Mr. Flattail took him again outside of the water, but before they left, they stopped at the door. Well, kid, he said, okay, time for another swimming lesson. Now, you've been doing really good as we've been going out logging and stuff. So I was thinking this time maybe we'd try something new, okay? Now, you're only going to have one time to get it. So try and drill it into your memory, okay? Okay, said Kant, I'm going to try. I'm going to try. That's all you have to do. You can do it, he said. The confidence made him feel easy. Feeling easy kind of made him feel good. Feeling good helped him pay attention. So he grabbed Mr. Flattail's back and asked him, what are we going to do? Mr. Flattail told him, now, when we get down in the water and we start swimming up, I know you can't swim on your own with your tail, but what I'm thinking is you move your tail back and forth so that you can learn which way to move your tail if you're in the water to steer you back to shore. That way, if you ever fall back in the river, you'll know which tail's back and they hit the water. And he did exactly what he said. He tried as hard as he could to remember. When I turn my left tail left, I go right. When I turn my tail right, I go left, up and down. And then finally, they were out. They stood there looking into his mission. The river went up over a couple banks and then disappeared into some sparsely forested area. Mr. Flattail had him draw the map a few more times. Thanked him for being there and for being so kind to all the kids. Mr. Flattail gave him a prize. It was the same thing that he'd done with the rest of the kids. It was too big, though, for Cant to carry. So he asked him, could you hold on to this for me? Absolutely, kid, he said. One more thing. If you're strong enough, it's okay to cry. Okay, said Cant. And he left. Mr. Flattail, chapter 3. Hang on, I'm sorry. I've got bullet points here for chapters, guys. Right. As you know, my handwriting and my spelling is atrocious. So Cant, all right, chapter 4. Cant kept on going. It took about a week. He was feeling really confident, though. He was getting much faster at picking out spots to hide as he was traveling, because you remember you take 3-4 steps and hide. And while you're taking those 3 or 4 steps and then hiding, you got to be looking at the next spot after this hiding spot to be able to hide behind. And he was starting to get really good at it. He was wishing that Riddick was around to see him, actually. He's like, I wonder if this is epic. The way that Riddick said epic, he didn't even understand what epic meant, but he's like, this has to be epic. So he was feeling good about himself. Well, one day he entered a different part of the woods, and it smelled different. He couldn't figure out what it was. It was curious. It was somewhat familiar, but then at the same time, it kind of wasn't. He was standing there, and all of a sudden, he heard something coming up behind him. He heard footsteps. He thought to himself at first, thankfully, I didn't just hear a voice, right? And then he noticed that the log that he was standing in front of was dark. It had all this dark bark on it with black little lines. And remember what Riddick said about turning invisible. Half of it is holding perfectly still. The other half is matching your surroundings. Riddick said, your front is light, your back is dark. If the thing you're looking at is dark, then put your front to it and you'll look like bark. So that's exactly what he did. He jumped to the log and he held to it. And he didn't move. And the footsteps kept getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And then they stopped right behind him. He still didn't move. They can't see me if I don't move. I'm not a quail. They can't see me if I don't move. But it just took too long. At first, he wanted to run. His instincts were to run. But then he remembered what Riddick said. He sat there and he thought to himself, I'm not going out like this. If they get me, I'm going to be barking and scratching and biting. I'm not going out like this. And that's what he did. He jumped up in the air, 3 feet in the air, whooshing his tail and slashing with his little squirrel claws and biting. And you could hear the of his little teeth. and he landed on the ground, and he tore out pieces of ground, and he flew like, all completely insane. And when he stopped, he saw 3 little young squirrels standing in front of him. 2 of them completely in tears, completely terrified. They screamed at the top of their lungs and ran away. At first, it was, wait a minute, what? Those were squirrels, he thought to himself. Wait, come back. I'm a squirrel. It's okay. Come back. He started chasing them. No, it's a misunderstanding. I thought you were a wolf or something. I thought I was about to get eaten. No, please come back. I'm nice. I'm not a bad guy. All of a sudden, a giant gray squirrel stepped out from behind the tree, 3 times bigger than Kant. Muscular, very just a gray squirrel. He bumped into him and fell down on the ground. And he looked up at him. The big gray squirrel stood over him. We don't want you here. You're no squirrel. You're a monster. I saw the entire thing. You turned invisible, then you turned visible again, and you jumped up in the air, and you did biting and slashing and clawing. You are a complete monster. We do not want you here. Kant couldn't believe it. He was only doing what he was supposed to do to get back home. But I'm not a monster, he said. And he started to explain. He fell in the river. It brought me here to you. A friend of mine said I'd wind up dead. Emil or probably drown. And by that time, all of the rest of the squirrels who were watching from the trees had listened to the whole story. And the big gray squirrel, he had sat down to listen. They'd never heard of such a thing. A squirrel that learned from other animals. They didn't like the fact that he had broken the rules. The big gray squirrel turned around to the kids and told them, see, that's what happens if you fall in the river. You'll wind up like him. Couldn't believe it. You don't like me. Well, we're going to watch you, he said. But you can stay here. Come on in. And they gave Kant a chance. Over a while, Kant proved that he wasn't insane and he wasn't a bad guy. There was outrageous circumstances, and had he just seen who it was, he wouldn't have jumped out screaming and yelling and stuff. But he was in a bad situation and everything, right? And finally, everybody started to get to know him. He's a really nice guy and everything, and he started to fit in. He started to learn how to do squirrel chores. He started to think about maybe staying there even. Well, it kept pulling on him, though. The sound of the river, he knew he had to go home. It was just a faint idea in his head, One day he walked up to the big gray squirrel and told him, I have to start traveling again. I have to go home. I know you do, said the big gray squirrel. The rest of the town all gathered together as he left. Well, I said they had started actually becoming friends, and they were like, they wanted him to succeed. They wanted him to be able to make it back up the river. So he left. In the morning that he left, he was walking out of the town, and for some reason he was thinking about something. See, Kant had been gone a very, very long time now. It's funny how a few days adds up to be longer and longer and longer. And he'd had an opportunity to watch a lot of different things happen while he was invisible and while he was trying to learn. Like Riddick had told him. One thing he noticed was that every time that the dots in the sky, the eagles or the falcons would come down and grab a mouse or something, there was always a little shadow in front of the mouse first. He had thought to himself before and wondered if he saw the shadow, could he dodge it? For some reason, he was thinking about it. He was a little bit sad too for leaving the squirrel town. So he had his head down as he was walking away and he was thinking, and then all of a sudden he saw a shadow. And before he knew what was happening. He didn't think about it. It was just instinct. He jumped to the left as fast as he could. Then all of a sudden, out of the sky, boom, right next to him, hit an eagle. The talons tore the ground out. His wings flapped. He screamed, I missed, all angry. Well, Camp wasn't going to stop him and let him get a second chance. He had already seen this bush over here that he was going to hide in, and then the bush after that, and the bush next. So he jumped over and grabbed on and tucked in underneath the bush and held real still. The eagle flapped its arms, tore dirt out of the ground, screamed, bashed its own head on the ground. Where are you? Where are you? He searched. Where are you? You have to be here. Where are you? I did not miss. I did not miss. He didn't dodge me. He kept screaming insanely. All of a sudden, everybody could tell why. From the trees, all the crows and sparrows started to come out and laugh. They laughed and laughed and laughed. Sharp missed his lunch. They made all kinds of jokes. Naughty bird. He would do bullying things to even the rest of the birds. He picked on the crows. He stole fish from other eagles. He treated the rest of the birds badly. He was basically a bully, and it was all completely about Sharp's ego. He couldn't let go of it that he had missed, and now everyone was going to talk about him. Angrily, he flapped his wings and flew off. He swore he would hold a grudge. He would find that squirrel. But not today. The rest of the squirrels watched from Squirrel Town. Where did he go? A couple of them whispered, he can turn invisible. They watched. They watched for 20 minutes before finally Kent stuck his head out of the bush and looked around. He looked to the sky for the dots, looked on the ground for shadows. He looked out for the next thing he was going to hide behind. He waved to Squirrel Town, and he took off to the next hiding spot. Squirrel Town, Chapter 4. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Sharp, Chapter 4. 1, 2, 5. Again on the road, right next to the river. Feeling good. The day had started to get a little bit long. The forest had changed. It went from being kind of heavily wooded to a little bit sparse. When Riddick taught him how to hide, he told him, be sure to be careful when the forest starts to get sparse. Lots of times owls will hunt inside of there. You want to always have a good hiding spot. And when you're in owl territory, you need to be in a tree or something going to sleep before it gets dusky dark. Well, Kent had been looking for a tree for a long time, but couldn't find one. He'd seen a few that he thought would do, but he wanted something better. And now nothing he'd seen are even as good as those. And it's starting to get dusky dark. He's worried and wondering, and then all of a sudden out in the distance, he saw a large tree. He couldn't make much out from it, but he knew it was a tree. Squirrels have this instinct to know that there's like a hole or a den or something like that in the tree. He could almost smell that something else had put a den up there, right? And so he started stalking his way through to the tree. He stopped, and suddenly, and then all of a sudden in front of him again, something hit the ground. It was an owl. Kent wasn't messing around. He knew what was happening, and by the second time, everything that had happened to him was just dumb luck, it turns out. Maybe dodging Sharp, but still, it was dumb luck that he was just looking down, that he had just thought about the shadow. And he wasn't going to stick around to have a conversation with this owl, but he didn't know what to do, right? There was nowhere to hide. He hadn't been looking. It's dark. The owl didn't see as good as it's day. All of a sudden, his instincts kicked in, and he bolted. He jumped in the river, actually, and then he turned his tail hard. And the river shot him back over up against the bank. But as he hit the bank, he grabbed a rock. He jumped up, threw the rock the opposite way he was going to go. The owl turned around to attack the rock, and he ran up the tree. He scurried around the tree like this and then ran into the hole. He felt so good about himself that he stuck his head out of the hole and barked. Ruff, 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 ruff. It was his victory dance, right? Then all of a sudden he felt something hit the tree. He didn't hear anything because owls, when they flap their wings, they don't make any noise. But he could feel the percussion of the thing hitting the tree. He pulled himself back inside real quick, scared. He shouldn't be so cocky. He couldn't believe he had done that. He back all the way back against the wall. He kept real quiet and held real still. Hello? Whoever's in there. Hello? Are you there? You made it in here, right? Can't just kind of like still stood there. I know you're in there. I can't get you. You might as well come here. Are you there? Hello? What are you? Yes, I'm here, said Can't. I am a squirrel. Squirrel? What? You couldn't possibly be a squirrel. There haven't been squirrels here for like 20 years. How the heck would a squirrel get here? So Can't told the story. From the beginning to the end. A friend of mine said I'd wind up dead, a meal, or probably drown. I fell in the river and it brought me here to you. The owl's name was Mr. Bighorn. He had just started hunting. He had done pretty good that night already and didn't really need to hunt anymore. He was kind of just doing it for sport, and that's part of the reason that he missed. Plus, most owls aren't as cocky. They don't really care. You know, a little dumb luck miss. If nobody sees, it's no big thing, right? So he was thinking to himself, and he's like, you learned how to do this and this and that. I've never heard of a squirrel like you. That's so weird. He's like, very impressive the way that like you jumped in the river and you like shed it out in that rock thing you did. How I would have never thought of that. You totally got me. How did you do that? Well, Can't kind of explain. I don't have much other choice. A friend of mine said I have to pay attention to everything. I have to learn how the animals here live so that I can live here, so that I can get back home. The owl was very impressed. Owls are very intelligent and they really dig the ability to learn. Can't explain to him. I don't learn well, though. I wish that I learned better. Mr. Bighorn laughed, a complete and total gut laugh. You're kidding, kid. That's pretty good. No, you learn better than anybody I've ever met. Don't you realize that persistence is what's important in learning? Can't thought about it. He explained again. You have to persist. You can't resist. Give yourself to the thing you do. Think about it and practice it like you have, and you'll get back home. Tonight, I won't eat you. Mrs. Bighorn has asked me to lose a little bit of weight anyway. I've already eaten more than I probably should tonight. I'm going to let you go. But I'll tell you what. Don't be here tonight. Okay, said Can't. Well, Mr. Bighorn flew away. They talked all night long. The sun was actually starting to come up. He was a really interesting guy to talk to. Almost somebody he could have been friends with if he wasn't an owl. So the next day, he scurried down. He tried to take a nap, but he couldn't, and he kept walking, and the river was getting really loud, and he was starting to get a little bit frustrated, right? And he'd stop, and he did this all the time. He would stop, and he drew the map 3 or 4 times, and then he would check to make sure that all of the maps matched each other so that he knew that he was drawing them right. But still, it was kind of a sucky day, having been up all night. Finally, he found a little log. In the sunshine, there's some grass growing out in front of it, and he thought to himself, I'm just going to curl up in there and go to sleep. And so that's what he did. Well, it was a mistake. He woke up to something kind of like bumping him. It was warm on his back. Stop it. 5 more minutes. Come on, leave me alone, he thought. And then he realized what was going on. He woke up. Hey. Oh my goodness, he thought. I'm a meal. He turned around to look, and there was Starscream. the second in command of the wolves. I found you. I knew I would. I told you I would. I knew I would. I have found you, Squirrel. And now, you know what? I'll eat you. Kant couldn't believe what was happening. He looked at him. Why are you picking on me? He asked. He couldn't believe the words had come out of his mouth. He thought to himself again, maybe if I was just nice to him, he'd leave me alone. Pretty unrealistic, but I mean, it was the instinct. Well, the wolf was still taken back by this, but Starscream had to explain. Because I'm better than you. I'm bigger than you. I'm faster than you. You didn't beat me. You didn't beat me at all. That was just stupid. And now all the wolves are laughing. Everything is laughing. Do you know what would happen if they found out? I'm almost as big as the king of wolves. I will be the king someday, and you will not humiliate me. Squirrel. Yeah, but what's that? Said the squirrel. Starscream turned to look, and Kant threw himself in the river. He turned his tail and tried to do the same thing he did with the owl, but he couldn't do it. The river was running too fast. Too many other small streams. It was spring. The snow from the mountains had come in and was melting, and he just couldn't control it. He turned and bubbled and rolled, and then all of a sudden the little squirrel went to sleep. He woke up the same as he had woke up before. Half in the water and half out, and very, very cold. He tried to dry himself, and he tried to warm himself. And after a couple of hours, he did. He stood up, and he thought to himself, well, I'm not a meal. The wolf didn't get me. I wonder how far downriver I am. He looked around. He kind of almost expected to see the tree. He was almost excited to see Riddick and to be able to tell him what he had done, you know. But he was very confused because he didn't recognize anything. And by now, having traveled the river, he should have recognized everything. But then something smelled familiar. He couldn't figure it out. And then it smells like me. He realized that he was close to a squirrel town. It must be Gray Squirrel Town, he thought to himself. And he started walking that way. Well, he got to the edge of the squirrel town and he looked and he noticed, well, this isn't Gray Squirrel Town at all. All these trees are different and wrong. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the squirrels started to come out and look. And another big squirrel came out. This big squirrel had a big mustache. They actually called him Mustache. And Mustache was very muscular and strong, but he seemed kind of like a nice guy. He walked up to him and asked him, well, who are you? We haven't seen outside squirrels here forever. Or you're not a flying squirrel. How'd you get here? So he told him the story again. Mustache had fallen in the river too. Many years ago. He came from a similar place upriver. It was another stream from another ridge that had brought him here, and he had to make a home here because he couldn't make it back home there. So he fell in love with a little squirrel girl that he met, and he made a lot of friends. And actually now Mustache was like the leader of the town. He was like the sheriff and the guy that I went to with problems. He was even the plumber, you know, and he took care of everybody. He taught school even, and he taught a couple of the courses on how to bark and chatter. And so he kind of took Kant under his wing. They went back to Mustache's house and sat down, and Mustache explained to him, kid, I've got some bad news. You got washed way further downstream than you think you did. Your roaming days are over. You are miles and miles and miles away. He saw Kant's map and told him, you're 2 maps away. I know this entire river. I know the map that you've drawn. I would have to draw you 2 more of those maps. Look, the same thing happened to me. What you can do is live here. I can teach you all the squirrel stuff that you don't know. You can find a nice tree. Do like me. You can have some kids and maybe teach school. We'll do baseball in the spring, you know. Kant sat there with a smile on his face. Wow, that's a really long way, he said. It is. Okay, so I'll stay here with you. Thank you. Where do I sleep tonight? Until I get a tree, he asked. Kid, the missus will fix you up. We got a spare room right back there, okay? Thank you, said Cant. I really appreciate it. And when do we start learning things? Mustache told him, we can start as soon as you're ready, but we probably should wait a couple days because you fell in the river and you're really tired and you've been traveling a long time, and I'm sure that there's a lot of shock, so we'll take a couple days and then we'll start squirrel school. We'll find you a tree and you're gonna love it here, okay? Thank you, sir, said Cant. And he followed Mrs. Mustache to his room and with some pillows and a blanket. And she told him when seeds were going to be served for breakfast tomorrow. And he thanked her very much. And he walked in and she closed the door behind him for him. And he stood there. He stood there for a good minute. And then he threw the blankets and the pillow on the floor and he threw them against the wall. He jumped up and down and he smashed the ground with his hands. And he screamed and yelled and he cried. And he pushed himself up against the back of a wall in the very corner and he held his head and he rocked back and forth. I hate the trees, he said. I hate the grass. I hate the river. But more than anything, I hate me. That night, he barely slept. He cried himself to sleep. The next morning, though, when he woke up, he had a smile on his face. He liked the other squirrels. The other squirrels were very nice. They taught him a lot of very good squirrel things, and he stayed there with them for a very long time. A couple of years had passed, actually. He started doing really good around town. He learned everything that a squirrel needs to know, and he even taught him a few things. He learned about gardening and stuff along the way from other animals. And everybody liked him. He did a good job. But then during the day, when no one was around, all he could do was hate himself and look at the ground. I can't believe I fell in the river, he thought. I'm just so stupid. And he'd tell himself that all the time. Finally, one day, he wandered through town with his head down to the river. And he looked. In this town, it was a little more than a brook or a stream. It wasn't as big as the one that brought him here. He couldn't believe it went all that way. He looked into the river. You've been in my life so long, I don't remember anything else, he said. And I hate you. And he looked at his reflection. But I hate you more. And he went on hating himself as he walked along the river. And all of a sudden, he heard something scream. He heard three things screaming. He heard three little squeaky voices way off yelling for help. Cant couldn't help himself. His instincts kicked in and off he ran. Someone from Squirrel Town needs my help, he said. It didn't take him long before he got to the clearing with the tree on the edge of Squirrel Town. Right outside of the border of Squirrel Town was another very large redwood tree, and in the front of it was a very small hole. And in front of that were three coyotes, and they were digging at that hole and laughing and taunting the little things inside. Oh, come out, come out. We're hungry. No, another one would say, no, we're not hungry. We just ate. Come on out. We just want to talk to you. As they dug and dug and dug, and one of them circled the tree looking for another way in. Coyotes turned around to look, but nobody was there. Down here, said the squirrel. And I looked down. Can I help you? He said. You know, I was afraid they weren't going to be enough. Look, guys, look, he wants to help us. Yeah. Can't do it. Good idea, he said. Coyotes were like, why? Well, the other two chattered and laughed next turn. Squirrel time. You know, squirrels normally stay in town. I said things have changed. I'm actually the scout for a pack of wolves that lives around here. What I do is I go out in front of them and I find them things to eat, and then I go back and tell them where they are. And so the things inside that tree are for the wolves and not for you. And if you don't leave them alone, then the wolves will eat you for dinner too. They laughed. One of them kind of like was thinking about it, and everybody else laughed, right? The other two just laughed. Yeah, laugh you can, he said. Of course we'll laugh. A squirrel working for wolves? I mean, seriously, no, it's time to do a meal, right? He goes, oh, if I were working with wolves, I'd probably smell like one, wouldn't I? Tilted their head and thought about it. They leaned over and smelled her, and they jumped back. He's like a wolf, they said. His bracelet. Panicky. Mr. Squirrel, sir, we extend our apologies to you and to the wolves. We don't keep up with current events very well. We had no idea that this was happening. It's an awesome idea. We love it. I think there's some squirrels in that tree there. Then you just tell the wolves when they get here, you know, that we gave them to them and everything. This is our gift to them. And if they're ever in town, stop by, right? All right. May we go, Mr. Squirrel? Squirrel Wolf, sir? Yeah, get out of here. You look like you're nothing but skin and bones anyway. I don't think they'd like you for a meal. Leave whatever's in the hole. Yes, sir. Thank you so very much. Okay, yeah. Well, bye. And they were gone. Can't stood in front of the tree. Hey, come on out now. It's safe. Are you sure? Said a trembling little voice. Yeah, I'm sure. It's can't. Come on out. Coyotes are gone. Well, 3 little kids and a little squirrel babysitter walked out. What are you doing out here? He asked. Don't you know? That's how you fall in rivers. That's how you get eaten. Go back to Squirrel Town. They explained it was an accident. They didn't mean to fall, or they didn't mean to get chased out of town. They were just on the border, and then the coyotes ran around. And it's okay. It's okay. Just go home, okay? It's all right. And so the Cant didn't. He took off in the opposite direction. He followed the coyotes for a good 2 or 3 miles to make sure that they were gone. And then he went back to town. He got back and everybody thanked him and everything. And then that night he went into his own tree and he went into his bedroom and he sat down on his bed and he thought about it. If I hadn't fallen in the river, they would have been eaten, he thought. And he remembered all the times like that on his journey. The little baby bird that fell out of the tree that he took back, the little fish that he threw back in the water, the ants that he helped that time. He looked down into his bowl of water and he saw his reflection. This water came from the river, he thought. He looked at the water. I don't hate you anymore, he said. And he looked at his reflection. Don't hate me anymore, he said. Just a young squirrel. I fell in the river. It's funny here to you. The next day came, and Cant went to Mr. Mustache. Mr. Mustache, sir, I have to go home, he said. I know, said Mustache. I've known for a while. I think we all have. You know, but you do. You need to go home. I'm going to sit down and I'll draw out my maps. I'll draw my maps right to yours, and then I'll double check yours to make sure that it's right. We will sit and we will practice this until you get it right. It's time for you to go home. So that's exactly what they did. It took him still a couple days, not because it was so hard anymore, but because he knew that if he took his time, he would for sure be able to learn it right. Because that's what he did. So chapter 5, what was that chapter called? No, we're past start. Oh, that was chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was chapter 7. The title is Not, spelled with a K. So it's time to leave town. Everybody threw in a big parade, actually. There were streamers and confetti and blowing of horns, and they baked cakes. They all came up, and all the little squirrels who had baked him something to leave full, right? And he felt so good and he felt so happy. He regretted a little bit how he had felt about himself and that he wasn't able to be part of the town really and everything. But he knew that everything was okay because however things happen are how things are supposed to be as long as we give maximum effort in doing it is what he came to believe, right? So he started walking out of Squirrel Town. And he remembered the last time he left a Squirrel Town, right? So he was looking down when all of a sudden he saw a shadow again. He didn't even think. He bolted to the left. And all of a sudden the eagle hit the ground. Again, it was sharp. This time, though, there was nothing to hide in. And this time, he didn't want to hide. Squirrel jumped to the side, then back again, and then at the eagle. And this time he poked him in the eye. The eagle screamed and grabbed his eye. He wasn't expecting that. He'd never been attacked by lunch before, right? He just grabbed his eye, and he threw his whole tantrum and everything. He turned around to look, and he was gone. Again, the eagle searched everywhere and threw a tantrum. And once again, the crows came out and laughed, and so did the sparrows. And the eagle vowed vengeance. I will find you, blah, blah, blah. I'm a banner, and you know how it goes, right? And then he finally flew away, and everybody watched again for about 20 minutes. He must have somehow run into the forest, one of them said. And another one whispered, he can turn invisible. So they watched. And he did. After a moment, he crawled out from underneath a leaf and a twig. I don't know how he did it. Nobody knew, but he did. He waved like it was no big deal. And then off he went, like sometimes wannabe heroes will. And the next thing you know, he was in the forest again. He followed the river. He was getting close. He actually caught back up to the area where he had met Riddick before, there where he first washed out of the pond at the very beginning of his map. He felt so good. He sat down and he drew his map that Mr. Flattail had given him originally with the stick on the ground. He drew it 3 or 4 different times so that he knew for sure that he knew where he was going, and then he kept on going. And this time it didn't take him so long. He'd gotten really, really good at finding the next place to hide. And he was super fast too. He knew if he looked at the ground and he saw the shadows, he knew that he could dodge them. He was picking out not only the next place he was going, he was picking out 2 or 3 different places in case he wasn't able to get to that place, or in case he got attacked, he could go to that one instead. His brain had done this so long now that it was just starting to fire. He didn't even have to go slow. He stopped doing the 3 or 4 steps and then hide. He would lunge into the next hiding spot with almost even having to take steps in between. Now he leaped through the air like the Wolf King. He got to the furthest place he'd ever been. According to the map, he was about 3 days away from the waterfall. After the waterfall, there would be 4 hills and then Squirrel Town. That's when something terrible happened. And that feeling hit him again. That every time that he had hope, every time he was doing well, everything was going good, something terrible happened. He didn't recognize the map from the river that he's seen. The river didn't look like the map. This wasn't on the map. He sat down. He drew the map. He looked again at the river. It's not the same. Something's wrong. He wrote it, he drew it, kept writing it, kept drawing it, kept looking, kept thinking, kept seeing. Something's wrong. He realized what it was. He remembered then. There's a spot here that goes left and goes right. Mr. Flattail said that if I take the wrong one, that I will certainly fall back in the river. If I fall back in the river again, I might wind up, I don't know, getting washed out to the ocean for all I know, he thought. He was the only one in the forest that even knew what the ocean was. And how he learned that, nobody knew. So he cried. He sat there, he remembered what Mr. Flattail said. You know, you're strong enough, you cry, at least when nobody's looking. And he cried and cried and cried. And then he looked and looked and looked, and he remembered meeting Mr. Flattail and the way that this had happened to him before. And he still hadn't learned how to learn something that couldn't be taught, right? So he couldn't figure out left or right. Now it happened again. Another voice behind him. Hey, why are you crying? I'm not crying, he said. I am deeply contemplating the error of my ways. Whoa, dang. Say that again. I am deeply contemplating the error of my ways. I love it. Can't turn around and look. And of course, it was a gigantic grizzly bear standing there with a big, stupid looking smile on its face, with big, pointy white teeth and claws. And he sat there and just, yep, I can't beat a bear. I'm going to beat a bear, huh? Howdy, he said. Well, howdy, little buddy. My name's Bart. I'm Bart the grizzly bear. I live around these parts. I'm out eating berries right now. I wish it was salmon season, but hey, that's okay. What are you doing? How are you doing? Hey, wait, what are you? Hang on, wait, no, don't, stop, don't tell me. Little ears, you got that little sniffer thing, long tail with a lot of fuzz on. Squirrel, you're a squirrel. Yeah, I'm a squirrel, I said. I knew it. Wait a minute. Squirrel, outside Squirrel Town, river. You smell like wolf. You're him, aren't you? You're him. You're the squirrel. Are you the squirrel? You're the squirrel that's trying to get home, aren't you? Are you the squirrel that's trying to get home? Yeah, I'm trying to get home. I'm a squirrel, so I guess so. I knew it. I knew you were the squirrel. I knew the squirrel trying to get home. The whole forest is talking about you. Did you know that? I'm friends with the birds. I know the birds don't talk to like a lot of the forest animals and everything, but the birds tell me everything. I am really, really good friends with the birds. Bart the bear went on to talk and talk and talk. He would talk about everything and anything that came into his brain, he would talk about. He had absolutely no interest in eating little squirrels. He was actually a big admirer through the grapevine of what he had heard that the squirrel had achieved. He let Can't know that the whole predator side of the forest was talking about him and how he had beaten an owl, how he had beaten an eagle twice, he'd beaten a wolf once. Get it? Once. Starscream never told anybody about the second time that he beat him. And that he had an epic journey to get home, a mission that every predator, anything with any kind of respect for travel and a mission would respect. So Bart asked him, wait a minute, why were you not crying a minute ago? Kent kind of laughed. That's good, he said. Well, the reason I wasn't crying a minute ago is that you see this map? He's like, yeah, you see this map? Yeah, you see this map? Yeah. You notice how they're all identical? Yeah. You notice how none of it matches what we're looking at right now? Bart. Well, yeah. It's because this and this line aren't there. I know, I figured that out a minute ago, he said, but I don't know which way to go. And a friend of mine said that if I went the wrong way, I'd probably fall back in the river. And another friend of mine said that I was probably going to wind up dead, eaten, or probably drowned. So I got a 50-50 shot on which way to go. And I don't know, man. I just think I'm going to sit here for a few more minutes. Well, buddy, you don't have to worry about that, said Bart. No, I live around here. I know this whole river. I fish out of here during salmon season and all. You got to take the left road. You just take the left road. That's going to take you right back up to the falls, and you got 4 hills, and you're on the ridge. I know the ridge really well. Actually, a lot of the squirrels there bark at me sometimes. It's pretty cool. I've got a place up there that I winter in. It's been 2-3 years since I wintered up there, and I was thinking about maybe heading up there anyway. So, the river's running pretty strong this time of year and all, and you really, hey, since we're friends now, you want to just hop on my back and I'll take you the rest of the way. I'll take you at least up, top of the waterfall. That way, like if we got to cross or something, you'll be fine. Can't thought about it. Yeah, if you're really heading that way, I would definitely take a ride. Shoot, yeah, hop on, kid, he said. Thanks, I can't. Crawl up on his back and sit down, lean back. Bart reached down, grabbed some seeds, handed them to him, and they started off. And Bart just kept talking and talking and talking and talking until all of a sudden he stopped dead. Cant was actually thrown off of Bart's back. He stopped so fast and landed about 2 feet in front of him on the grass. Cant stood up and dusted himself off and turned around and looked. What's wrong? Said Cant. But Bart was frozen with fear, terrified in his place, looking at the ground, like the ground was going to hurt him. Cant couldn't understand. He stamped his feet on the ground. He's, Bart, hey, Bart, what's wrong, man? What's wrong? Bart, come here. Cant walked over and, yeah, Bart moved some of the grass and some of the leaves off of the ground, and they looked. There was a big hole leading straight down. Bart explained, okay, what's happened here? This is a deadfall trap. So what's happened is there used to be a cliffy ravine here that led down about 70 feet, but all of the trees on both sides wound up falling over it. Then the grass and stuff grew on top of that. Then those trees started to rot on the bottom. So like if I walked out there, I'd fall through it. And that makes me heavier too. We're going to have, yeah, of course. Watch your step. Watch your step, buddy. Sam, he hopped back up on his back and he thought to himself, hey, if you go, I go. We go, right? And they went around. Well, they got to the waterfall. They were having such a good time. And Bart had decided just about, you know what? I'm wintering there in that cave in Squirrel Town. It's going to be a good winter, too. I kind of like that cave. Well, I got up to the top of the waterfall and they stood there, and then all of a sudden they heard laughter from inside the trees, a kind of weird cackling laughter, a laughter that Cant had heard before. It was the coyotes that had back in Squirrel Town that he ran off. They walked out of the trees and they walked up to Bart and they walked up to Cant. Bart just looked at him. Why don't you get out of here? He said, kind of like just like looking down on them. We aren't here to talk to you, said the leader. No problem with you. We don't even have any problem with the squirrel. We actually are working for the wolves right now. Sound familiar, kid? We're running out in front of them, trying to find the squirrel so we can deliver a message. Cant was rather unimpressed. He crawled down off of his buddy's back and he walked down in front of him and started to walk up to the coyotes, and Bart tried to pull him back and he's like, it's all right. And he walked up to the coyotes and he looked up at him and he's like, what's your message? He said. And the coyote got down real close. Oh, you're going to love this, he said. The wolves have come up with an idea. Not just like you. You've broken the laws of nature. You don't behave like you should. And you have to be stopped, or this might infect the entire forest. And then what will we do? So the wolves have an offer for you. It's a duel. You have to go back. You have to go back and fight the eagle, and you have to fight the wolf. Don't. The wolves are going to go down there and they're going to tear out those trees and they're going to eat all of your friends, both squirrel towns. What are you going to do? Can't. Thought about it. You look back at them. All right. You go back and you tell the wolves, I've spent my entire life getting up this. And if they think that I'm going to go back down it to die, they're crazier than I am. Why don't you go tell them that if they want to fight, I'll meet them right here at the top of the waterfall when they get here. I will save Squirrel Town if that's what they want. Now go tell the wolves. Coyotes thought about it. It's no, we don't care. All right, kid, you're going to wait here. If you try and run, your Squirrel Towns are done. So they left. Bart stood there. What are you going to do? A duel? He looked at him. Can't thought about it for a minute. I don't know, he told Bart. Back at Squirrel Town, everything was terrible. The wolves were already there tormenting the squirrels. In case the other squirrel didn't come back, they had dug out some of the trees. They had fallen over. They hadn't gotten any squirrels yet, but they were definitely being real jerks about it all and everything. The coyotes showed back up and they told the Wolf King, sire, what was happening. And he agreed. So he and the guys and most of the predators, actually, most of them except the bears. The bears weren't really into all of this and everything, but most of the predators went. And a lot of the leaf eaters, too, went to go and watch to see what was going to happen. About 2 days later, they showed up at the waterfall and they met Cant. Cant was standing there. King of the Wolves walks up. The rest of the wolves start to circle him. The rest of the predators are kind of far back. Well, kid, it's good to see you. How you been? Said the king. Well, it's pretty good before I got your message. So I guess I've been better. How you been? Hey, I can't complain. So I can't believe you're actually here. Yeah, I can't believe I'm actually here too, so I can't. Let's get this done. That's brave words, said the wolf. All right. Just as he said that, the shadow hit the ground. Now, Cant wondered to himself before all this happened. He thought, twice I've dodged the eagle. Twice I've dodged left. The eagle might expect me to dodge left. Maybe I should dodge right. But then the eagle might know that I'm also good at thinking of these things. So the eagle might hit right. So Cant decided not to move. And he didn't. And the eagle hit to the left of him. He hit the ground hard. But this time he didn't scream. He didn't yell. He was focused. And he was intent on doing what he was there to do. He turned around to slash with his beak, but Cant dropped to the ground and he jumped at the eagle. He hit the eagle right in the chest and ran up underneath his wing and ran around the wing, biting at his feathers and chewing. The little squirrel teeth can't do much. He could only pull 2 feathers out before the eagle threw him back against the ground and then jumped up and went to slam him with his talons, but he rolled again and then he jumped and he hit the eagle again and then he ran underneath the other wing and he ran around the wing, biting and clawing. climb, but he could only get 2 feathers. And then all of a sudden, Sharp threw him back down to the ground, and then he slashed at him. He got him across the chest, and then he slashed with his beak, and he got him across the forehead. And they flapped his wings so they could get 2 feet off of the ground, and then swoop down and grab the little squirrel and fly away. But when he flapped his wings, he couldn't fly. He flapped and flapped and flapped and flapped, and he couldn't fly. Well, now all of a sudden he isn't that worried about killing the squirrel. He can't figure out why the heck he couldn't fly. He just keeps flapping his wings, and he cannot fly, right? Well, all of a sudden, up in the trees, you hear laughter. Crows and sparrows start to laugh again. Sharp's feathers have been plucked. Somebody said, "Hey, it looks like a flightless bird. Somebody order KFC?" That's not funny, he said. All of a sudden, he started to run, flapping his wings. He wasn't worried about anything anymore except getting away. A flightless eagle? How did this happen? He thought to himself. And then all of the crows and the sparrows started swooping down, and they chased him off into the forest, and he was never seen again. Can't stood up, walked over, grabbed the 4 feathers that were laying on the ground, and held them looking at them. The wolves walked up and circled him again, and Sire, the king of the wolves, walked up behind him. "What did you do to that eagle?" said the king of the wolves. "Did you know," he asked, "at the end of every bird's wing, there are 2 feathers. They're called prime feathers. They're actually what gives the lift. If you pluck those feathers, no bird can fly anymore." He blew the feathers to the wind. He turned around. "Starscream?" Well, Starscream was already on him. Hissed the wolf, and the chase was on. Can't knew that what he would do. He didn't have any patience, and he wanted this through. So he chased the little squirrel. The squirrel ran as fast as he would have run into a clearing, and they thought out of the forest and landed on the grass and screamed. "And now you're done. Now you're done, squirrel. I told you that I would have you. And you know why?" Starscream was standing about 3 lunges away from him. He was out in the middle of the field, and there was nothing he could do. All Starscream had to do was jump 3 times, land, and bite. Starscream screams at the top of his lungs as he takes the first lunge. "I'll always win because I'm bigger than you." 2 lunges, 3 lunge. He hits the ground. He starts to bite, and the wolf disappears. Wolf disappears in the thin air. Everybody watching didn't know what happened. What did the squirrel do? How did this happen? Can't just stood there the whole time, waiting for the lunge, waiting for the bite. He hadn't moved until he looked down into the hole. "You're heavier too," he said. Can't had let him back the deadfall cliff that he and Bart almost fell in. He knew that if he could get out there, it wouldn't support his weight. Can't couldn't defeat him. The wolf had to defeat himself. He walked back over to the king of wolves. "Sire, king of wolves, are the squirrel towns safe?" "Yes. The squirrel towns are safe. Good job." Everybody applauded him. One of the younger wolves said, "If he was a wolf, he'd lead the tribe. He would have taken Starscream." "Can't. I think I'll go then," he said to the king. The king looked at him. "About that. Kid, you're not like anything else in the forest. What if it spreads and everything starts doing like you do? We can't have that. You did good. You did real good. Real good. And we are so honored to know you. You won't be a meal, and I'll make it quick. Do you have anything to say?" Can't look at him. "I know something you don't know," he said. The wolf was taken back by this and kind of laughed. Not funny. Okay. "You know, this whole time I was kind of thinking, How are you going to take it? You're going to be honorable and brave, or are you going to beg? I hoped brave. I think we all did. But I kind of thought you'd beg. To think that you'd offer me a one-liner like you thought you'd get out of this when you can't fly and you're surrounded by almost every predator in the forest. I had no idea that would happen. Okay, I give. What do you know that I don't know, Cam? Well, I have something you don't have. The wolf. What do you have I don't have? He looked down. He saw the shadow. Friends in high places. All of a sudden, without a sound, a very large bird swooped down out of the sky, grabbed him, and flew away before anybody could say or see or hear anything. And of course, they didn't suspect it. Of course, they didn't hear it. Who would have thought that an owl would be flying during the day? But that's what happened. Mr. Bighorn from the tree before had come in and saved him. What nobody knew is that hours before the wolves showed up, Mr. Bighorn showed up. Back when the coyotes were headed down to the wolves and Bart and Cant were trying to figure out what to do, Mr. Bighorn landed and apologized. He told Cant that he was very, very sorry that he had gone home and told one of his friends about what had happened because it was so impressive that he was able to throw the rock and then do the swimming and then up the tree and then the barking and everything. And he was just kind of like bragging about it and everything. But then the rest of the owls found out and they were all really worried that it was going to make them look bad and everything. And he was very, very sorry to Cant because he was part of what happened. And if he hadn't said anything, then maybe all the rest of the predators wouldn't have got so upset and everything. Cant had reassured him, it's all right, friend. No, it's fine. And so they worked out this deal. And Mr. Bighorn said that he would help him. They all knew that the wolves wouldn't keep their word. And so they flew away. Present. The wolves stared with their mouth open into the sky. The rest of the predators kind of just shook their head, wondering what had just happened. And all of a sudden, a voice appeared behind the King of Wolves and said, well, I don't guess you were expecting that. Well, the wolf didn't even have to turn around. He knew who it was. It was Buck, the king of the deers. He was the largest stag in the forest. He was gigantic. He was bigger than even the king of the wolves, with 18 tines on his head and razor sharp hooves. He was a good leader who took care of his people. He took care of more than even the deers and stuff. He took care of the rest of the little animals and everything. And he was actually kind of almost friends with the wolf because during the annual meeting of royalty in the forest, they would like talk and stuff. So they were like almost friends. But at the same time, they were kind of competitors too. Why the kids say frenemies, right? And the King of Wolves said, no, I wasn't expecting that. As he turned around, I mean, really, who would? But you know what? It's not going to save the squirrel towns. Ha! Buck, the king of the deer, was highly unimpressed. He shook his head. You wolves are really honorable with each other, but you don't really know how to treat other people. We've all been talking, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of years now. I'm like you, I'm kind of curious, So I've been thinking about what made the squirrel the way he is. Because that's really where the root of the problem lies. And I think that what happened is he wound up in a place where he didn't have any options. There was nowhere for him to live. And so he had to learn things that no other squirrel would have to learn. It was either learn or die. And he learned because young squirrels are supposed to learn things, to learn how to live. And so him in an environment that wasn't made for him learned how to live in it so that he could go home. So basically, he learned things that he wouldn't have ever had to learn. Squirrels. Now, squirrels are always, every squirrel I've ever known, except for him, are always really, really happy to just live in Squirrel Town and bark at predators that pass on the ground. Now, you go back. Now, see, one of these days, I don't want to be walking around and step on Bunny's home and then find out that I've upset that bunny And then that bunny went and spent a year with a beaver. And then I wake up one morning and find out that bunny had learned how to fall a tree and he dropped it on me. Okay, that's what the rest of the forest is kind of concerned about right now. So you go back to those squirrel towns, and you tear up the trees and you eat as many squirrels as you possibly can. You will never get all the squirrels. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of squirrels running around having to learn things that they never had to learn before. You look down on the bottom of the hole. You might have wolves laying at the bottom of gorges all over this forest. And we don't like that. To preserve the order of the forest, we all unanimously voted you leave those squirrel towns alone. Because you're big and you're bad, but you know what, Wolf? We know where you live. Look, don't preach to me about squirrels or what I can and cannot do. But you make a good point. There's no reason to give them reasons to learn things they don't need to know. Deer continued. As far as the squirrel goes, if you want some kind of vendetta with him, he has broken the laws of the forest. We don't have any problem with that. It's between you and the squirrel. He looked down again in the hole. But you know what? I might leave him alone. Heck, he's headed upstream anyway. We'll probably never see him again. Buck, the king of the deer, turned and walked away again, back into the forest. The wolves looked upstream. One of the younger wolves standing next to the king said, I hope he never falls in the river again. King of the wolves thought, me too. High above it all, Cant soared. The first ever squirrel, I think, isn't he? Well, the first ever that we know of to fly on the back of an owl. Everything looked weird up there. He didn't have eyesight like an owl or an eagle or a hawk. It all looked like just spots and blurs and dots to him down there. He couldn't even see the river, and if he could, he didn't know what the heck it looked like. He looked up at the clouds, and that was pretty cool. They were all so close, he thought he could almost touch them. He thought maybe they're dreams blowing on the bright blue sky. He'd never thought about that before. You can make shapes out of them. The big owl spread his wings and turned his head around to look. Decided he'd soar for a little bit while they talked. Owls and most birds can turn their head almost all the way around. So he turned around to talk to his friend. We're even now, said Mr. Bighorn. You never owed me anything, friend, said Cant. Mr. Bighorn offered to take him all the way to the ridge. All the way there. Cant explained that he needed to finish the journey on his own. And if he would be okay, he could just take him back where he picked him up. So they flew back and he dropped him off in the top of the tallest tree so that they could look around and make sure that there wasn't any ambush down there. He felt really good, though, when he saw Bart walk out into the clearing. He knew that he wouldn't have got set up by him. He climbed on down and he went over to his good friend Bart. Oh, my goodness, little buddy, I can't believe what happened. That was, and he just relived the entire event. They started traveling again. Cant climbed up on the back of his friend, the bear, and next thing you know, it was hill number 1, hill 2, hill 3. He remembered the first day that he left, the night that he fell in the river, the 4th hill that he had to see that brought him here, that had brought him years. He looked over next to him in the river and he wasn't a young squirrel anymore. I wonder if they'll recognize me, he thought. I wonder if I'm in trouble, he thought. As they got over the top of the 4th hill, they couldn't believe what they saw. Bart said, forest fires never get squirrels. They always have somewhere else to go. Was there somewhere else they could go? He asked. As they looked out, the entire ridge had burned. It had burned maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 even. Well, it would have had to have been inside 2 because Bart said that he was up there like 2 years ago. So it had burned out only like maybe a year and a half ago. Bart asked him, is there somewhere they would have gone? Cant pointed to another pile of ash up over on this side of the ridge. Bart started to cry. Can't started to cry a little bit too. For too long, Can't was consoling his buddy, though. Look, like you said, forest fires don't get squirrels, so they couldn't go to the second place where they needed to go. They just kept going, okay? They're all right. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. Bart cried, what are you going to do? How are you going to find them? I don't know, answered Can't. The river won't lead me back, and there aren't any trails. I don't know, but it's going to be okay. I'm an older squirrel now, and they've all probably gone on. I don't even know if I would fit in very well the way that I've changed. What are you going to do? Asked Bart. Can't thought. His heart was broken, but he knew that that's what life was about. That was the lesson that he believed, was that life is hard and things will break and it won't go right, but that's okay as long as we make it, like Riddick said in the beginning, epic. And he had. I don't know, Bart, where I'm going to go, but you know what? I don't think I'm going to go up this river anymore. It's too dang hard. Yeah, little buddy. Over the next few days, as Bart and Can't talked, Bart told stories about when he was a cub, when he first came out of the den, his sister, the salmon, the way he squished his toes in the snow, and the nickname that he had when he was a baby was Brownie. And that fits because he had a very brown coat. At the same time, over those couple of days, while Bart talked, Can't listened and laughed at a lot of the jokes, and he was chopping down what to everybody else would be small sticks with his teeth, like Mr. Flattail trying to. Boom. Boom. He was gathering the sticks and he was carrying them over to the river. After a couple days, Bart stopped talking and he, what are you doing with the sticks? Can't sit down, and he was grabbing grass around him, long strands of grass, and then he was twisting it like he had twisted the fur from the wolves to put around his wrist in the beginning. Well, you see, I don't know, a couple years ago, I saw these humans, and they were building something that floats on water. I don't know what it's called. I'm going to call it a floaty thing, though. Now, I don't know how to do it, but I do know that if I keep on trying, I will succeed. So I'm going to build one. I've decided that instead of going upriver, I'm going to go downriver because it's a lot easier. I'm going to float all the way to the ocean, and I'm going to see what the shore looks like down there and maybe meet some fish and stuff. I think it'll be a really cool adventure, and maybe I can help some people along the way and meet new people and things and see what they're like and everything. That's awesome, said Bart. I'll miss you, but you know what? I follow this river too, so maybe one of these days we'll meet up again. Bart helped him as much as he could try and figure out how to put it together. He'd never built anything like this before, and he didn't get to watch the humans do it very well. Can't spent about 2 weeks trying different things, wrapping this part with the grass and then that part and then weaving them. He did figure out finally something that Mr. Flattail had taught him about weaving one stick underneath another and then the other one back over that and under 2 others would hold something together. And after about 2 weeks, he was able to build himself a floating thing, or as we humans call it, a raft. All of his friends from all over the forest that were in that area came to say goodbye to him. They had watched him build that strange thing he was building. But you know what? That squirrel did strange things anyway, so he was just fun to watch. That morning, he got on the raft, he gave his friend Bart a hug, and he shoved off down the river. He passed all the different squirrel towns along the way. He was able to wave at Gray Squirrel Town, and he saw his friend, Mr. Mustache, who when he was a kid, they called Knot. Then he waved at them and he kept on going. He leaned back, grabbed a couple of seeds and started eating them. stuck his tail in the water so that he could drive whichever way he wanted to go. And he was feeling pretty good about himself, smiling and happy about the future, when all of a sudden he heard a voice right next to him. "Hey, pardon me, sir," the voice said. He turned around and looked, but there was nothing there. "Down here," said the voice. He looked down, and there was a little fish sitting there. Now, Kant had tried to talk to fish before when he'd seen the river a couple times and tried to talk. Fish didn't talk. Maybe they used some kind of sign language. None of them ever talked back. He couldn't figure out how to talk fish. But this fish was talking like he was. The fish went on to explain that, yes, fish have their own language and everything, and it is very difficult for them to learn other languages. But this fish had been learning how to talk squirrel for a very long time because some of the fish had a problem that they were wondering if he could help them with. And they had heard that he helps people with problems. He said, "I don't know. I'll give it a try. Let's go." But you know what, guys? That is a story for another time. The end. Well, I hope that y'all enjoyed that. Like I said, I've been telling that story to myself for quite a while now, and I tell different renditions of it. It never really lines out exactly the same. There are a few parts of it and stuff that, like, if I ever wrote it down or something, I would want to add. Like, there are a couple parts about, like, the birds and why they only talk to Bart. That could be kind of like a side story or something. I thought it was fun ending the story with another adventure starting, and then, like, how's the squirrel gonna help fish, which I don't even know. The story kind of stops there, so it, like, we'd have to figure that part out later. It's based after a story called Not the Alaskan Squirrel, written by my dad, I believe in 2002, maybe 2006, somewhere around there. I knew it by heart, his story, and I used to tell that story, his story, to myself while I was out walking, and then this one just kind of like evolved into being what it is today. I like to think that my dad might have enjoyed it, and I hope that he would have gotten the metaphors inside of it and the way that I tried to connect what he did with his story, and his life with my story and my life. Lots of the parts match. I changed a few of the names. I changed a couple of the characters. I don't think there was a gray squirrel in his story. I made up Starscream. What was Starscream's name in my dad's book? Oh, crud. See, I can't remember right now, and I'm kind of on the spot. I'm super nervous through the telling. I'm glad I didn't cry. I don't know how to end it now. So I got it. We're the creator of our own story. There are other plots and stuff that are involved in our story, and so we, can't control all of them. However, we can control our character in it. And with a little bit of learning and a little bit of foresight in what we're doing, we can achieve anything. Thank you guys for being there. Thank you for all of your support. Never give up, never surrender, because you're worth it. And remember, I believe in you. Bye, guys.